Okay, so for those who don't know, I'm Gianni, and I'll be talking about the teacher strikes that currently just ended in Washington. They ended on September 14th, so everything I'm talking about is going to be basically very new and relevant. And my major claim in this article, situation is going to be that the teacher strikes in Washington were a necessary action needed to bring a mutual concession in the proper execution of the McCleary fix. Now, a couple of definitions that you need in order to understand would be paramount, which first of all these definitions are according to the Washington Constitution, as well as NEWS, which stands for EARLs, the Essential Academics Learning Requirements in Washington. And the definitions would be paramount, which means public education is funded first. Ample, which means more than enough, not what just is left over. And all is referencing to all students regardless of wealth, race, gender, and ethnicity, as well as education being referred to as the knowledge and skills students need to succeed by the state educational standards. Now, my justification for this claim would be that the Supreme Court case, McCleary fix, is authorized to improve the McCleary versus State of Washington. Now, for a couple backgrounds, I'm going to kind of go very in-depth about the McCleary case as well as the McCleary case versus the state. So the first one that was that started it all was the McCleary versus the state of Washington. And it was a lawsuit filed by NEWS, which was the Network for Excellence in Washington Schools, with the petitioners being Matthew and Stephanie McCleary as representatives for their kids, Kensley and Carter, as well as the parents of Haley and Robbie, whose parents are Robert and Patty Venema. Now, what they are doing is they're accusing the state of violating paramount duty, which is stated in the Washington Constitution. And this took place in the King County Superior Court of Seattle with Judge John Ehrlich. And it was filed, his final decision was made on February 24th of 2010. And his decision was basically declaring that the state of Washington, under the actual Washington Constitution, is obligated to amplify fund of public education for grades K through 12 until the year of 2018, which was supposed to be the deadline for the McCleary versus State of Washington. And according to Judge John Ehrlich, he says the provisions of the state constitution are mandatory. One, establish actual costs of providing all Washington children with the education mandated by this court. And two, establish how respondents, the state, will fully fund the actual cost of this paramount duty and dependable state sources. Now, because they found the state of Washington guilty, and according to the Constitution of Article 9, Section 1, the state of Washington received $7.4 billion to be evenly distributed until the year of 2018. Now, for the McCleary fix, it was filed on August 30th of 2017, and it was a continuation of the McCleary versus State, and it was opened by the actual Supreme Court, because the reason being the legislation of 2017 found the state of Washington still in violation and failure of execution of the McCleary versus State. And according to the document, it says that they are mandatory, they're requiring the state to now give periodic reports that achieve and will show actual compliance of the Washington in order to show progress throughout the public education, as well as the first report being due after the first 60 days of the August 30th, and that the reports are supposed to be public as well as given to the respondents, at least in this case now, which is the McCleary. So the respondents are now the parents, as the appellant is the state of Washington. And as for the Supreme Court, they determined that they actually have full authority, and they will be the ones to determine and measure whether or not the progress is actually being seen and made. According to the document, it states that this court has determined last year that despite repeated directives to the state to provide a complete plan for fully complying with its paramount duty under the Washington Constitution, according to the court, imposed a sanction against the state of $100,000 per day payable to segregate accounts for the benefit of the basic education. And also as a response, in order to help speed and help ensure that public education is progressing. They also added an additional $1 billion to the Washington State to be distributed in order to reach the goal by 2018. Now, for my supporting claims, there's one more thing. The reason why the teachers are actually going on strike is because they want increased salaries and they want like reasonable class sizes. Now, so for my supporting claims would be that the first day of school for 295 school districts in the state of Washington were delayed. And because of this, all the teachers were renegotiating contracts that they had been given prior to the actual first day of school. During the actual strikes, Governor Greggles came out and made a statement saying that building a bright economic future also starts with providing our children first-class education. We are making progress, we can and must do more. He's referring to the McCleary fix as to where they are trying to improve, and it's just slowly happening. And because of this, Tacoma, Battleground, Tumwater, Evergreen are all different schools, elementary and high schools, but they were the first ones to actually go on strike. But prior to this, all the teachers unions met with the administration and superintendents to try and negotiate with their new contracts that they were giving to ahead of time before the first day of school. And because they weren't receiving much of a response, they ended up going on strike. But their protest was a nonviolent protest. All teachers wore red shirts, and they held up signs that say equal pay, keep good teachers, fair pay, and they would stand in front of the school as well as the legislation building, just trying to bring awareness. And they actually did get a lot of community support to keep the good teachers that we had in Washington. And for my second claim, it'd be that the teachers unionized before the first day of school even happened. Like for instance, Clark County had negotiations with the district administration 2 months prior before the first day of school, but they were repeatedly told by the superintendents that there wasn't enough money to evenly increase the salaries to the numbers that they wanted, as well as paying for school items and it's like special programs that the school was also mandatory to pay for. But because of this, because of the McCleary fix, it also they gave an additional $1 billion directed for the actual K through 12 educators, and this just created a lot of conflict between a lot of the teachers and administration. The teachers in the Clark County were at least trying to bargain for a 22.82% increase according to the NPR, which is the National Education of Washington. And they, of course, didn't receive that. And so prior to this, they all met in the stadium, and it was a 98.4%. They all agreed to go on strike the first day of school. And when the strikes kind of occurred varies upon which school because of the first day of school. And it lasted roughly 3 weeks.
Your time ran out 2.5 minutes ago,
Oh.
so you need to finish.
Okay. So one of the controversial reasons was that the teacher strikes didn't need to actually do the strikes. They could have gone to legal positions and actually filed another lawsuit, but it was because the first day of school was delayed, it created a sense of urgency, and they actually got a lot more of the administration to actually have a mutual consent. So there was a sense of urgency that brought the teacher strikes such a great impact. And a lot of the schools actually did get a lot of their salary increase, although the highest I believe was the 8.33% of salary increase, but that's from 57,288 to now 97,746. Just depending on that range, it depends on your teacher experience, but the teachers all did receive the salary increases they wanted, as well as ending and bringing the first day of school, the first day of school was only postponed by roughly 3 weeks. So I would say that the teacher strikes were actually beneficial and brought the point across.
All right, the claim is way too complicated. It's got multiple components in it. And then we get 5 minutes of background material before you actually get to what the supporting justifications are for your position. You need to simplify this argument incredibly. There was a court order that required the schools to spend money a particular way, and the state of Washington was slow in implementing that. And your argument is basically that the teacher strikes are the things that finally got this happening, that it's the fact that the teachers went on strike that produced the agreement to follow the order that the court had given. That's, basically what you were saying in your argument, at least as far as I can tell. So, a lot of the background is too complicated and too involved for an oral presentation. You got to simplify this idea. Basically, the Washington schools were under a court order and they were not fulfilling the court order. And it's only when the teachers went on strike that the schools finally started following the court order. That's basically your argument. Everything else is just way more detail than we need to have. One thing that I do think that you make an assumption on here is that the fact that teachers got this increase in their wages means that it is now paramount and ample and that all students are getting what they need. And I don't know that that's the case. Are teachers' salaries paramount in order to create the adequate education that the students are required to get under Washington state law? I don't know. Is there any more effectiveness because a teacher gets paid more as a consequence? There's no evidence that says that. So I think that you've got a lot of information here that applies to the legal issue, but none of it applies to the criteria that you yourself set up at the beginning of the speech with those definitions. And so it really feels like it's kind of going off the rails at times. I got to keep this really short because you went 9 minutes and 44 seconds and you were supposed to go 6 minutes, so it's a little over time, and we've got other people to hear. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.